Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to tonight's podcast. Tonight's topic is big bad wolves, things that stop people from playing. We're joined by two wonderful star guests. Unfortunately, our third had some IRL issues and most likely won't be joining us, but he may show up sometime near the end of the podcast. We'll see how it goes. But to introduce people and do things, oh, I forgot to push a button. My bad. Boop. Don't worry, people watching this later. That'll just show up on the YouTube, so it'll be fine. Um, to start off, just going in order, obviously you guys all know Younger, so we'll skip right over him and go to Punk Rock. Jenny, please introduce yourself. Give us your
Y-
first bit of spiel stuff.
I don't know Younger.
We'll get to him eventually.
Oh, perfect. I can't wait. Hi, guys. My name is Punk Rock Jenny. I'm a TikTok creator in the Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop gaming and just overall gaming space where I talk about the psychology of being a world builder and a dungeon master, creating tension, and using music and D&D emotional role playing for healing purposes.
Fantastic. And where can people find you?
You can find me on TikTok at Punk Rock Jenny.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Jumping over to Cathy.
Hi everyone, I'm Cathy, as Rook kindly introduced me. I have much less to do with the world of gaming than ever here. I'm an entrepreneur with about 5 psychodiagnoses, and among one of which is ADHD, and I am pivoting from digital marketing for personal brands in general to trying to help women who are also neurodivergent uh, basically launch businesses that support their mental health.
Fantastic. And where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Your Funnel Fairy.
Yeah, fantastic. You're Funnel Fairy. So, since you guys haven't met Younger, my apologies. I always forget that the guests don't speak to him ever. This is my business partner, Younger. Uh, Younger, introduce yourself. They already got to talk to me for an hour, so you know.
Yes, my name is Younger. As Rook said, I am his business partner in crime with Epic Sages. I love TTRPGs. Have a huge spot in my heart specifically for Dungeons and Dragons. And I mean, besides that, I used to be in the army, but I'm no longer in the army, and now I can enjoy this community and have lots of time.
All right, so
That's
let's.
all I got.
I was gonna say he doesn't have anything to plug but our stuff, so we'll wait till the end for that. Uh, so let's get started on the topic. So big bad wolves. When we talk about big bad wolves, right, when it relates to gaming and playing and all that fun stuff, we're talking about the things that huff and puff and blow your house down. The things that chase you through the woods and eat up your time. That is disguised as a little Red Riding Hood. Things like that. The stuff that is the boogeyman in the background to just stops people from playing, right? And in some cases, you need a legitimate hero to take an axe to their chest to cut those things open and free your time up. Sometimes you need uh, better building strategies, a stronger house. And sometimes you just need to know how to avoid the creature in the woods, right? Sometimes it's just a boogeyman that's just spooking you and scaring you, right? So those are the kind of anecdotal stuff we're going to talk about, right? Those things that can be avoided by attacking something head on, avoiding something completely, and building better strategies and bases to deal with said problems. So there's a plethora of list of things. So I'm going to go to our guests here. And what, Jenny, most prominently, what is your biggest, baddest wolf that you faced when dealing with players?
Well, when dealing with the hindrance to getting new players into the game, or I kind of reflect on my own journey, and I was not a typical nerd or a geek or whatever they'd call it. I was kind of hindered from playing Dungeons and Dragons for a very long time by my friends and friend groups saying that this isn't a game for you. This is not something that you want to do. There's too many rules, and it's not for people like you because there's this massive stigma around Dungeons and Dragons that it is for a very nerdy community. And I was in touring rock bands and stuff, and can't be associating with that type of stigma. And so I didn't get to explore it until I was an adult. And gosh, absolute waste that I didn't get to grow up on D&D. But I love being a part of it now and being a part of the community now. And then I think there's even more significantly greater barriers to taking on the role of world builder or dungeon master, um, that are far beyond that of just the players.
We'll get into it. So this is just the first one. We're gonna do this a couple different rounds, so don't
Yeah.
worry.
I don't
So-
want to hog all the time. Like, if you get me started, I might not be able to stop.
It's okay. We'll yell at you every once in a while. Jumping over to Cathy. Cathy, what about you? You are not a player currently, which is okay. Um, when people play and have fun, right? Your focus has been more the neurodivergent stuff. What are some things that like really amp up your wolf, right? If your wolf is neurodivergent issues, what is something that just like picks it up and messes with you when you're trying to start something new?
Well, I mean, from a neurodivergent perspective, at least ADHD specifically, which I can speak more from experience because I'm not a medical professional, it's been executive functioning, which is basically initiating anything, planning, working memory, which I assume would be very important for a game like this, especially as somebody who is um, the master of the game and would have to have all these moving parts in memory. I think that would be an issue. But I think for me, the main issue for not engaging in this Dungeons and Dragons specifically has been that I was born in Romania and growing up we didn't have a community there, and then for a while I was a digital nomad, which means I wasn't staying in a place enough to build a community and find a community specifically for this. And I guess in the digital nomad world this is not as popular, maybe exactly for this particular reason that it's harder to. I'm actually not aware whether it is whether you need a very fixed community for it. So maybe one of you could inform me if you could accept players coming and going. But I'm yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, specifically, our business does that pretty much all the time. We always have people come in and out. And if you watch our silly YouTube channels and stuff like that, we have new players join us pretty frequently, especially with other systems as well. Like our Lancer game, we joke was plagued with people dying off all the time because players, schedules changed or they had to leave or whatever. We had to replace them with new people, so on and so forth, until it kind of just sputtered out. Where there's like, all right, enough of this. And that's really how D&D games go too. Is they can fluctuate really hard. Especially if you have a like year-long campaign where you got like 3 or 4 dudes that are chilling, that are permanent players that are always there, but you got a fourth or fifth rotating person that just kind of goes in and out because scheduling or because they work every other week or whatever, right? That interferes with them coming in. One of our wolves that we'll talk about is adapting to those changing schedules, right? Which is we'll talk about that as one of our talking points. But yeah, it's totally a thing that you can do. It's definitely not easy. And with a lot of these wolves, and so I'll continue to call them throughout the night, getting rid of them is not going to be easy, and that's going to be a large focus. Like they are all going to take effort, except for the ones that you can kind of just like skirt around. Uh, Younger, jumping to you. What's a wolf that you've faced in your journey as a player and as a DM?
So I really like two of the major points that I was able to extrapolate from what they were saying. Starting with punk rock Jenny, her whole talking about the initial journey of entering the stage late and not growing up like with it's in your childhood is something that I share. I didn't even know about it until I was an adult, and then I had some friends that were into it, and I was like, well, I had a friend that was into it, and I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this or not. Like, and I barely heard anything about it. And I was like, seems kind of weird. Bunch of nerds just sitting around a table, like playing chess. I was like, that does not sound fun. And then actually went and watched them play for like a single session. And I was like, like this is actually pretty fun. Like we're sitting around eating food, a few snacks, getting to know some new cool people, and then basically watching them create a movie, like just with their words. And I was like, wow, this is basically creating your own video game, like in person. I was like, this is incredible. And you just have to follow these rules to a certain extent. But other than that, you can basically run your life however you want to in the game. I was like, that is interesting. And that was what spiked my interest. And so, but if you go into historical frameworks, like the whole Stranger Things is based off of like the 1970s and 1980s, like CIA or whatever, basically being like, "Oh yeah, devil worshippers," and it's like, oh, it was all just BS, you know. Um, in the end, and it has nothing to do with that. It was really like I think the original thing was like Gary Gygax was creating the game in his basement and or like with a bunch of friends, and then his wife thought he was cheating on him because he's like, what else are you doing at 10 o'clock at night away from the house, like for months on end. And it's like, oh, they were actually just creating a game in their basement and having a good time. And so I think hitting on to the stigma both of like the historical context and even the modern day stigma of like, oh, you wouldn't be into that because you're into sports or you're into this or that. When like in reality, like Dungeons and Dragons, the whole premise of it is like you can be a character that you either like couldn't be in real life or that like you could have a direct reflection of yourself except in a fantasy setting, or a lot of TTRPGs. Um, and I believe that also goes into my next side, which goes more along the lines of, at least as a player, it can be kind of therapeutic, like, go hang out with some friends, relax, and deal with like people in a group in a community that you're familiar with. Maybe not at first, but you very rarely encounter like if you haven't already encountered Dungeons and Dragons, you're gonna have to meet somebody new before you play it. Just like in the real world with the rest of your life experience, if you have a job or you have new clients or stuff, you have to get familiar with. But like I was stressed a lot, and one of my only like relaxing times was going and playing Dungeons and Dragons. And so I think those are two really big points that I'm hitting on, and I think I don't want to take up more time.
All right, that's fair. So, kind of to address all your guys' points, right? We're going to talk about how we slay these wolves that you guys presented. And like I said, we're going to go through this a couple different times, right? So starting with Jenny's point of the stigma behind playing, right? This is what we call our boogeyman, right? Because this is one of those ones that is, as soon as you start I'm going to lovingly call it the addiction, it's hard to stop, right? Once you start playing, like Younger said with his experience, he just watched and got to see how cool and exciting and how fun it was, right? He lived in the experience for a little bit. He didn't even play a character, if I remember correctly. He was just there watching, drinking, and stuff, and hanging out with us. We went and immediately the next week he joined in, started playing, kind of thing. So if you like look at avoiding this one or setting this one up, it is really just be kind to whoever you are trying to get into the community, right? Let them hang out. Don't force them to play. If you have a pre-made character, cool beans, throw it at them. If they want to play, they can. If they don't want to and they just want to watch and see you guys be nerds, let them. It's not going to hurt anything. Worst comes to worst, someone is hearing your story. So, like, as a DM and another player, inviting new people to check it out to get past that stigma is the easiest way to defeat it, right? Because again, the game is so enjoyable when you're doing it and when you're with the right people. Uh, then it's not a problem. The downside to that is there are politely the wrong people that you can play with, and not necessarily those people are bad people, but sometimes you just don't vibe with who you play with, right? That sometimes personalities collide. You might have someone that's a huge big stickler for the rules, looking at Younger, um, that can make some stuff difficult and might throw people off, right? So like if you have those players at your table and you're having someone watch, politely talk to those players and be like, hey, tone it down on the rules layers tonight. You can argue with me offline or at a person or whatever. If you have any problems with rules, we're trying to show someone the fun side of stuff, right? And that's how you as a DM or another player can kind of get past that. if you're really worried it's an issue. If you are trying to give them the full experience and you have one of those wonderful players at your table that will explain every single rule, they will teach that person perfectly, quote unquote, right off the bat. So use your pains in the butts to help deal with the wolves, right? We'll call them your axe. You can use your axe to cut that open, so on and so forth. Scare away your boogeyman, all that fun stuff. That's an easy way to get over that stigma, though, is just being kind to people and letting them come to you at your own pace, right? If you're nice about it and you whatnot, they will come, right? What's the saying? If you build it, they will come, right? Yeah. Secondarily, jumping over to Cathy's stuff with the uh, lack of community, right? Luckily, we live in a digital age where being a digital nomad isn't the end of the world anymore. It used to be that if you weren't in person sitting at a table, you couldn't play this game, right? You didn't have the rules, you didn't have the people, all that fun stuff. There are plenty of online communities, ours included, that will grab people, teach people how to play, find groups for people that may or may not cost money. You know, some places you pay for, some places you don't. But generally, if you're like, hey, I want to learn, or will someone teach me, or something like that, someone will try and pick you up, right? Unless you are being unapproachable about it, like you're making fun of it, or trying to like poke fun, or you're obviously not understanding the spirit of the game, we'll say. So if you're trying to be anime character number 127, that's just like the main most important person, you're gonna have a bad time, right? That's not what D&D is about. And like coming to that understanding that like you might be the main character, but you're not the main character, right? You and your friends together are. You'll have your stories that you'll tell, so on and so forth. But if you're just wanting to learn and have fun and have those experiences, especially as an adult, it's simple to just ask, right? The slaying the wolf on this one is just going out there and looking for it. A couple Google searches later will get you somewhere. Again, not always the easiest thing. Scheduling's pain, and we'll get to that in a bit. But steps are, baby steps will get you in the right direction eventually. Last but not least, jumping over to younger stuff, which again was kind of touching on the other two topics. But the historical context of dealing with the, hey, it's satanic panic craziness. The wonderful thing about TTRPGs is you don't have to play D&D, right? If someone is so against D&D because there's demons involved, go play Starfinder. Go play Blades in the Dark. Go play something else that is not that, so they can get into the thing and see that it's not crazy. If their thing is demonic panic, whatever, maybe don't do a couple of them, because there's definitely some that are a little more intense. So if you pull out Mork Bork, that's your fault. Don't pull out Mork.
Demonic panic doesn't rhyme,
It
Rook.
doesn't. Sorry. What's it?
No,
Sorry.
we'h work on that.
What's it called?
I think.
Sorry, I know it has
Come
a
on, you can do this. I
satanic
want to tell
panic.
you.
I'm sorry,
Oh, there we go.
satanic panic. Oh, my apologies. But anyway,
I wish I had it with me here, but my table just bought me a professional wrestling TTRPG that we're going to play next month. I'm very excited. I wish it's in the
Oh
other room.
man.
that's so
I
funny.
just want to show it off. It is like satanic panic, like embodied. It's going to be amazing.
That's fantastic. I mean, heck, I have a Power Rangers one. I would also show up, but it's already at the show for the events tomorrow. So but if
I
you
didn't
need
know
something,
there was a Power Rangers one.
yep, it's a it's a oh, who makes it? Sorry, I'm trying to think of the creator for it. Anyway, but Power Rangers TTRPG. That's a Dimension 20 style Renegade Studios, the people that made it. So they also do the Transformers and GI Joe and all that fun stuff. So like,
Cool.
you're into the cartoonsy kids shows turning into TTRPGs, they got you covered. Let's see. So now that we kind of talked about those, let's talk about some other ones. Like we're gonna do it reverse order this time. Younger, one more wolf. Limit yourself to 2 minutes, will you?
One more wolf, and it's not going to be schedule. Okay. Then I would say one of the bigger, I guess it kind of ties into the schedule, is like determining like a meetup location. Like everybody's like, oh, like there's not enough room at my house, or whatever. And I guess you could say one of the great ways that you can get around that is, hey, if you got a like relatively ish quiet space, you can jump on a Zoom call if you would prefer to do that rather than have and host 6 or 7 people at your house. That might be a little bit difficult, for some newer players, but you can always meet with them offline, and like go and touch up like their character sheets or whatever, ask what they want to happen in the campaign, so on and so forth. And I guess a lack of confidence or experience, like I know tons of players who just lack the confidence of taking on the role and expectation of a dungeon master. A lot of them, like when I first started, I was like, oh gosh, I have to create this whole entire world right now. I have to pre-plan the whole scenario. When I should have known better and was like, I probably ruined all of my DM's plans, and just stuck with some improv. Have a general overlay of like, this is what's gonna be there. They might fight these kind of monsters. They might be in this kind of dungeon, but like the players are going to derail your story at least a little bit. You can keep them kind of sort of ish in a box, but like without them realizing they're in the box. But and that's how I like to play. But if you just let them go crazy and off the walls, like you can, yeah, just freestyle it. And hitting on the older point that Cathy made, memory can be a problem. Which is why I highly recommend, not necessarily this, but like have a notebook and just write down, be like, NPCs, these are the non-player characters involved, or oh, these are the character names, so on and so forth for this town. Have assets like I have a silly little thing over here. Like, like they come up with all sorts of things, like little cards that have like, oh, the items, and you can physically hand this to your player if they're across the table from me and be like, this is what you have. And so when I have questions about it, you better show me your card. Um, Draw a map, if you're artistic or something, you can have a map, or if you're not artistic, you can steal somebody else's. I didn't say that.
Younger, that's where you plug and say buy our maps. Sheesh.
Yeah, you can buy our maps. I made a couple.
Heck, Younger made this month's Wheel of Chaos item, which is a town map. But I do want to jump in on this though, because you're 100% correct. Most TTRPGs have a character sheet, right, that has everything listed out that's easy to read. Whether you have an app that does it or if you're doing it physically on paper, if you're one of those people that needs physical paper, I highly recommend printing them out, signing them down. I can't tell you how many character sheets I have in the stuff behind me back here. Years and years of history on different worlds and planets all locked back there. Do I remember all of them until I start reading those names? No. So don't feel bad writing stuff down. You know what I mean? Like that, it's meant to be that way. There's a lot of stuff you can do.
Or digital help.
That too.
Like, I hate in particular what are they called? The Wizards one that they do?
D&D
The
Beyond.
really Yeah, D&D Beyond. I hate them. But besides my personal biases, they have, access to directly to Wizard stuff, and you can download it all for overpriced bargains, right? Or you could go and have third-party applications, which I prefer because they're either really cheap or free, and just as good and editable, which I think is great, without having to pay like $59 or something crazy.
So I mean, on that though, the other thing is with developing technology is jumping into AI stuff and note taking. There's plenty of little AI, especially if you're playing in an online game, that you can just set on a table to take notes for you as you're going along. So like you can get line by lines of what your players said or how they interacted, major key points of what happens. Right? There's all kinds of phone apps or new devices that you can just set on the table that'll auto record, and then once it's done, it'll send you a little thing that says, "Hey, this is how the session went. These are all the important key points." And it really makes people's lives a lot easier. If you need someone to take dedicated notes, but everyone at your table's like, I don't carry a notebook because I don't have a single pen or pencil in my house, get an AI to help you. Um, there are free ones, there are expensive ones, kind of like Younger said, but roll into your strengths, right? If your strength is storytelling but not note taking, figure out a way to fill in there, right? That'll help alleviate that fun stuff. All right, I'm gonna push forward because you're gonna catch me rambling. I love talking about AI. Cathy, your turn. A secondary wolf.
So I'm thinking just going off what Younger has said when he mentioned improvising. I think when you join a new community, at least for me, there will be a certain anxiety about having to improvise in front of new people on the spot, just like. But at the other end of the panic spectrum, let's say, I think that this actually can serve in a way to bridge some. This is going to sound maybe big, but some social divisions, because our society everywhere nowadays is so divisive. And I've seen when people play, not necessarily this, but anything, they have their those instinctive barriers a bit lower, and they can be more open to each other. And I think everybody understands, yeah, you're anxious about improvising and so on, and they have this built-in empathy. I don't know if this is that's how I imagine it to be. And I'm assuming this can actually help heal some things, just playing together and becoming with that open mind. So just, yeah. Sorry, this was supposed to be about bad wolves, but
No, that's great.
I was thinking that, yeah, it
No,
could also help.
I actually have to ping off that because those bring up important topics, and you two also feel free to pitch in here. But with the lowering of social things, right? A lot of our division comes from political stuff and so on and so forth, right? I can't tell you how many of my friends like have very differing political views than I do, but we are happy to play these games together, right? It's not something we fight over. If we want to argue politics, we can argue politics over the gnomish king in the kingdom of wherever, and don't have to worry about whoever's running the real country IRL, right? Doesn't matter who we like or who we don't like. We all hate the gnomish king because he's a bastard, and we can agree that that man is a bastard and go on from there, right? Um, so yeah, totally gets over a lot of that stuff and can really like let you know who people are, right? It really cuts through the fake divisiveness and the separating of ways. You get to see people's characters through their fake characters, which sounds silly, right? But getting a real connection for what you're trying to be as a person in essence, because you take a bit of your soul, as they say, and throw it into your characters. There's always something of you left over from when you create something, right? And so a lot of the times those characters become some truth that people can correspond with, and like, they're not a total terrible person because they have these beliefs. They're just a person who's believing things, right? It goes into having the what people call the human experience, right? And there's a German word for it, and I can't remember what it is, but it's the sudden realization that everyone else is living their own life at the exact same time as you and having to deal with all the fun, complex feelings that you're feeling at the exact same time. And I hate that I don't remember this word, but it's a fantastic description of like what you really get when you get to play these games, right? Especially when you start to DM and get to the back end of things, like it really hits really hard because then you have to figure out what all those people are thinking at the same time. The other thing that you touched on was the sorry, brain fart here.
Anxiety of
That one.
improvising.
That one. Yes. Big thing. People are very happy to help with that. And like you can play characters that don't talk a lot, right? If you are worried about role playing or you're worried about talking, you don't have to talk. Sometimes you just go, I'm gonna roll dice and hit things, and that's all you ever do. Your character is just the silent broody type that kills things. When we say go murder that golem, you and your magic or your axe or whatever, go and attack the golem. And that's what you do until you're comfortable to have a conversation, and like it allows your character to have growth as you as a person also have growth. So like that's very much a thing that you can do. I mean, we have a couple examples at me and Younger's personal table that we've watched been like they literally did nothing except for hit things with big weapons to being like very active and animated characters, even if it was only for short bursts. Like they went from literally just on their phones playing rolling the dice to like being actively helpful in the story, whether it's in character, out of character. They do both. Jenny,
Would
who was
love
it?
to hit on that
Yeah, do
because
it.
a lot of people have the like, oh yeah, I have the barbarian and I swing and it is that exact thing. But like, you don't have to just be that. like we had there's a particular character at a table that I played at, or a player who was newer, and he was like, I want to be a wizard. He's like, but I don't really know how like much of any of these things work and stuff, and so like I don't want my character to talk. I want my character to be a mute and like basically just have the ability to like cast spells even without verbal components and stuff. And I was like, it's like a little broken, but not super bad. So I was like, it's like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to play. Let's do that. You know, and then that was a story element, and then gradually as the player became more comfortable with it, it was like, okay, well, let's go get a regeneration spell and grow your ton back. You know?
That's a way to solve the problem. I like it. Miss Jenny, do you have any comments on this one? You look like you had a couple thoughts as we were talking there.
Yeah, I don't get to play with a lot of beginners like you guys do, so it's always interesting to hear your guys' takes on that stuff. But one of the wolves I frequently see, and when we were talking a little bit about lack of confidence, especially when it comes to making that jump from player to dungeon master, is the massive barrier to entry. Is the significant amount of rules can be very overwhelming to both new players and dungeon masters. You go out and you say, oh, you Google, how do I play Dungeons and Dragons? And they say, oh, first thing you do is you get the rule book, this player's handbook, and you get home and you have, like 156 pages of rules. And just to new players, this is incredibly overwhelming. And then far more overwhelming if you want to run games, because then in addition to needing this player's handbook, you need this dungeon master's guide. And you open up the dungeon master's guide and you say, okay, I'm ready to take this on. And you open it up and you get to the first page and it says, okay, your first step is you have to create a pantheon of gods. And your second step is you have to build an entire world. Like, what could be more entirely overwhelming than this poorly formatted book? And that's trying to make, your steps to running a game complicated as all hell. Heck. And I don't know where we are on that, Rook. Sorry, we didn't talk about that, did we?
Oh, you can curse all you need to. This is an adult show
younger
for
sister,
adults.
good. Very good. My cat might hear me. But it's overwhelming to whether you're a new player or a new dungeon master. The significant barrier to entry is most definitely the amount of rules for somebody that doesn't have experience playing tabletop games.
So, to talk on this, because I 100% agree. I think the most important thing to tell your players, right, is establishing your table expectations, right? Because the experience of us know about the rule of cool and how you can bend stuff, right? And how the rule zero is, the dungeon master makes the actual rules, at least in D&D, right? That isn't the case with all TTRPGs, but most of them have a, hey, whoever's making the game is actually running the rules and decides what they're going to use and not use. Having them A, understand that, and B, understand where your table comes from, like what you are expecting them to follow. If you are by the rules, like, and you want them to learn it all, like, they just need to know that. If you're like, we'll teach you as you go, if things come up, like, we'll explain it, right? We'll go back in time if you do something you're not supposed to and let you retry stuff. You know what I mean? For beginner friendly tables, that probably happens a lot. You just retcon when someone tries to take a super sniper shot with their arrow 500 yards away, and you're like, the weapon range is 420 yards, and you have to roll at disadvantage. And they go, so I can't make that shot. You definitely did that 20 you just rolled. Totally wasted. I'm so sorry. You know what I mean? Like, being okay with being able to tell them things and let them retry when they waste that roll or whatever, and not punishing them for trying something cool and it just being like, that's not how that works because it's against the mechanic, is important, right? Or rule of cooling it and then explaining afterwards that, hey, you're not going to get that shot ever again because yada, 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 here's actually how it works. So they have that understanding or expectation that, like, hey, it was cool that one time, but we can't do it from here on out.
Another great tip for new players is I can't tell you how many new players I've met, or at least Dungeons and Dragons players that I've met that have never actually read the player's handbook start to finish. And so I go, so how did you learn? Like, how did you learn? And so I think a lot of it is the self-awareness of your own learning style. And I meet a lot of players who learned by watching live plays or actual plays. And that's just how they learn, is to watch other people do it. Some people can read a book and learn. I have to read the audiobook and then I will absorb it forever. But I have met so many people that if they just start playing, they'll learn, or if they just watch somebody else play, they'll learn. So knowing your own learning style is I'd imagine incredibly helpful for new players, especially. And Cathy, you can probably speak to this, like for more neurodivergent individuals who to know their own learning style.
Yeah, I completely agree with this, especially because and I have to bring it back to executive functioning, because this is actually the biggest pain point, that there's this prefrontal cortex disconnect with another part of the brain. Anyway, I won't go too much into this, and it fires in ways that it doesn't fire for neurotypical people. And at the point where you're trying to engage in initiate new learning and keep focused, because there's pretty much, at least with ADHD, you have hyper focus or no focus at all. You have to find a way that really engages you, otherwise it's not going to work. And as Jenny was mentioning, for me, I'm assuming, based on like what I've observed of my life so far, that I would much more enjoy this immersive experience of watching other people, rather than I love reading, but it wouldn't really give me the dopamine hit that I need to be like, okay, this is why this is fun. Oh, I mean, I would probably read it as because even if it's 150 pages, it's I as if based on how Jenny described it, it didn't sound very appealing to read just like the step by step. If it's 150 pages of processes, like a standard operating procedure, that would be much. But I'm assuming it's also a bit of creative. I don't know how these manuals work, but I'm guessing there's some creativity inside. Otherwise, it would be mind-boggling to read or to read through it.
It's about a
But
paragraph
not
every 3 pages of creative stuff. The rest of it
Yeah, a
is
little bit. Yeah.
so like they explain how world building works in whatever world you're building in, and they'll generally have an example party, right, that they've crafted that'll have 4 to 5 people with 4 to 5 characters, and they'll sparse out
Or a
it
table.
or a
They have a
table, yeah,
lot of
yeah,
tables, right, for you to choose from. Yeah.
yeah, and
oh,
that's kind of
interesting.
how it goes through. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Younger's
I
favorite thing
got
are
a hint.
tables.
So I really enjoyed the like different learning methods that everybody has, because I know like mine personally, like even just like not even a learning method, like I just if I don't have interest, it's not gonna stick, and I feel like that's how it goes for most people. If you have a vetted interest, you're going to be more inclined to learn something about it. And uh, when I started playing, the way that Rook here kind of, how I at least remember how Rook kind of stated it, was like, worry about your 7 pages of being a warlock. He's like, that's it. That's all you got to know. And you don't even need to know all of them. You just need to know like this first first 2 pages, because you're level 1, and then just go and gradually building upon that foundational knowledge as you level up. You get to watch the other people at the table also level up, and if you pay attention to what they're doing, like I did, I'd be like, why does he get to go do something cool? Why can't my character do that? And they're like, well, it was written in his rule book. And I'm like, let me see that dang thing. Dang it. And so that was how I ended up learning the majority of the classes, because like I even after I played for years, I was like, I've never played a barbarian. There's just not my general interest. And so I was like, but I knew a lot about barbarians just because I had a friend who really liked playing barbarians.
Younger's
uh,
learning style is jealousy.
A hundred,
Envy.
a hundred percent, 100%. Just spite learning. That's a hundred
Fight
percent how he
learning.
learn. If you tell Younger he can't do something, he will immediately try and figure it out. 100%.
Perfect. He's like, yeah, I have to like that, but also fuck them.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's yeah. So again, he started with me. I was his first table. Um,
Oh,
and the process went just like that, just how we described it. We gave him a little bit of taste, did his thing. We kind of built him up. 'Cause I think when you join on the original bit, right? You were part of the level 1 stuff, yeah.
Like the second play of that session
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
whatever of
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So level 1 warlock of shenanigans. His first session, this man sent 2 bears to maul people to death. Just
As one does,
as
yes.
one, just randomly, just a great
Mm,
creative rule of cool. Probably shouldn't have done it, but we allowed it because it was funny.
yeah.
It was one bear eating one man, and it
Okay,
was like session 5.
no, that was the first time you played. That's the first
And
time
look,
Younger
see,
spoke
it
in
hooked
character.
you. So, yeah.
Um, but he is now the best rule lawyer we have at the table. So if you need to get a reference, he can get everything but the page number.
Gotta
Um,
have one.
so, um, going back into our original analogies, right? Of building houses. So this is dealing with your huff and puff and blow things down, right? So that stigma of having to learn lots of stuff is your big bad wolf in this situation. That like the rules are really hard, right? And so if you go to a little house and it gets blown over, you didn't explain the rules well enough. You go on and so forth, and you build a big foundation and start things and build it the right way. It doesn't matter what anyone says, what hot air they blow at you. They're not. It's not going to blow over what you're trying to do, right? Um, Silly analogy, but I'm gonna go with it for today. Let's jump on because we're doing good on time so far. Let's talk about the biggest baddest wolf that face most tables and probably most businesses and people in general. Scheduling.
Hmm.
This one's everyone's favorite thing. So we're gonna go around the table here and let's get a terror story for scheduling. We're gonna start with Jenny this time. What's a scheduling horror story that you have, if you have any?
I don't know if I have any horror stories, just kind of interesting moments in time. I play with a lot of people in my age group who have young children and busy careers. So scheduling is always a big challenge for us, and I think all of us who play also lived through COVID. Um, Luckily, I live in Florida, and we had like COVID. We like decide I don't know, like Florida as a whole like decided like we weren't really doing that, so we didn't like go into lockdown or anything for more than like a week. We just I don't know, like Florida just decided not to participate in COVID, but. We that did cause some interesting challenges at the time with the lockdowns, and we had curfews, and we had an immunocompromised player at the time. And so that was all very interesting time to live through. But yeah, I exclusively play in person unless it's for charity or a guest event. Um, and so that always makes scheduling difficult. But I think, if you have a regular home game, you have your schedule and you have your thing. I'm sure it's much more difficult for you guys who run professional games and have new players in and out all the time.
It is a pain point, to say the least.
Yeah.
Kathy, what about you? In your business and what you do, how much is scheduling a pain in the butt for you?
So I'll share two things. First of all, my I mostly work with U.S. businesses and or at least North America businesses, and I live in Europe at the moment at least. And time zones, scheduling across time zones, various time zones with people, especially for example now. Daylight savings was activated, if I'm not wrong, in the US today, and then
Tomorrow
in
for us.
Europe not yet.
I think 2 days from now, Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah, Sunday.
Oh, sorry, Sunday.
Yeah.
It's Saturday for me, so I'm a bit. It's already Saturday here. Um, but it's not gonna start in Europe for another, I think, 10 days or something. So all the meetings that were scheduled will have to if you schedule through a scheduler, that's okay because they account for that, one of these booking like calendly things. But if you plan a recurrent meeting, you have to move, and I do that a lot. Oh, you have to move everything around and check with people, is this still good for you? uh People get confused, so that's a big one. But on the personal side, uh as I'm thinking of like engaging in any play or in any social activity, when you have some mental health challenges, it becomes a bit harder. I can plan ahead, but I've had a time where I had random panic attacks crop up, and then it was completely debilitating to have one of these before a meeting, because before showing up to a friend's thing. I even had one as I was preparing to go to a friend's wedding, which was horrible. I mean, not the wedding, sorry. Sorry to my friend there, her wedding was lovely. and it was just easier to plan spontaneously, to just do things spontaneously. But as Jenny mentioned, um, we're at an age where a lot of our friends have kids and they cannot accommodate spontaneous like meetups. So that was a personal challenge of scheduling of my own.
Felt wholeheartedly, I promise, on both the scheduling and the dealing with parenting stuff. I mean, kind of to touch on a joke we mentioned either at the beginning or right before the show is like our solution is we just don't sleep, right? You just play late hours of the night. You can play with anyone in any time zone if you're willing to stay up late enough. Fantastic
Oh man.
example is Cathy over here. It's like what 4 o'clock in the morning for you? Just kidding. It's not quite that early, but it's close, right?
What?
It's 4 o'clock.
Oh wow, I'm good. Oh, that was with the back of my head. All right, I'll take it.
Wow.
We
Wow.
appreciate your dedication to
Kathy,
coming
go
to
to
the
sleep.
show.
What do you don't hang out with these weirdos. Go to sleep. What in the world?
It's okay. We switched this morning. I was up early to talk to her, so fair is fair.
Crazy.
Um, so Younger, you got any fun examples of scheduling horror stories?
Yeah, I really love what Kathy was hitting on with the time zone thing. Like within a professional workspace, like dealing with anybody who's in a different time zone, just normally without talking about daylight savings can be like terrible, especially if you're talking to different ones. Like, oh, I'm talking to the East Coast or Europe, or oh, I'm talking to East Asia, and it's like, and you're just flip flopping between the two, and you're like, I just need these people to all get on the same meeting, and it's never happening at the right way. And so I thought that was great. But outside of that, and talking on a personal level, more along the lines of what Jenny was saying, is like just everybody has their own individual lives, and their own jobs. And even though like most of my friends were in the army or something when I first started playing, or even like later into the time, it would be you could be in a different unit. And so one person is going to be off into the middle of the woods, like 100 miles away with no access to internet, for the next month. Or, and so you have to like accommodate that by being like, hey, I won't necessarily kill your character. He just went on another adventure, you know? And be able to come across it like that and to deal with the temporary things. Or like you just have like different people are working at different times. Like one guy's on night shift, one guy's on day shift, whatever it be, and sometimes you're able to accommodate those changes, and sometimes it's like, hey, maybe it might be best for a temporary hiatus on your part. Feel free to join whenever you have more time, or let's see if we can reschedule to maybe a different day will work better, so on and so forth. Like, oh yeah, if you work every day during the week, and like maybe we can reschedule for weekends if your wife doesn't get mad.
Right, because you got to see your family every once in a while, apparently. Ugh. But jokes aside, I mean, stories from us. The biggest killer of our players has always been someone quits, and so everyone else's schedule gets rearranged. Like it's generally not even our players' fault. It's hey, everyone's schedule got zoop zopped around, and I can no longer do Tuesdays because I have to cover 2 more shifts that week. You know what I mean? Um, and like Younger said, sometimes it's a temporary thing where they're just kind of filling in spots and they can come back later. But I think you can agree or disagree on this one, Younger. But our biggest solution for this one is always have a bigger group than you expect to play with, right? Especially if you're doing an online group. In person, you can probably run with that ideal 4 to 5 people a little bit easier. But if you're doing online, having 6 to 7 people sounds like a lot. But the amount of times that like all 6 or 7 people will show up, unless you have a super dedicated 6 or 7 people group, which is a near miracle, um, is relatively often. You're gonna have that 4 to 5 person because 2 people have things going on. Their kids are gonna have stuff. They're going on a date with their wives or husbands. Like they're doing stuff and things. And if you let your players be adults and let them do their own stuff, they will act like adults, right? That's one of the biggest things is like if you micromanage your players, you will scare them off instantaneously, right? With scheduling stuff, like allowing them the freedom to leave and come back as they need to. Cool beans. It's good to have limits. You know what I mean? Like our personal one is if you miss 3 sessions and then we get no talking to us for whatever reasons, unless you're like, hey, my mom had cancer and I just couldn't be by the phone because I was having a real bad time, right? You start the message with, you should have messaged me so we could have talked so you weren't by yourself through that horrible experience. But also, I understand and you work from there, right? But those kind of situations aside where someone just kind of like blown you off because they wanted to sleep on a Tuesday afternoon, like, okay, sleep on a Tuesday afternoon, don't play my game after 3 sessions. Uh, but,
And I'm
oh,
sorry to
go ahead.
interject, Rook, but you as a DM can also work with your players on that, right? So players don't be afraid to tell your DM what's going on in your life. One of our players was having another baby, and so she was going to be gone for a little while and couldn't come play D&D because it's actually kind of traumatic to push a human being out of your body. So I know, believe it or not. And so we came up with a plan together. I worked with her for her character being gone for those months, and we wrote it into the campaign. And so work with your dungeon master on that, and don't be afraid to talk to them. And hopefully, you and your emotional role playing will bring you all close together, and it won't be a thing to chat with your DM about it. But we're people, and we care about you, and you'll grow close anyway. You'll want to talk all the time.
Right. I'm gonna.
Jenny is a hero, and Rook is a villain.
Oh no, that's not what I was implying.
I don't know what you're talking about. People laying sharks, dude. That's my best story for that one. One of my
Get
favorite
eaten.
one of my favorite tropes is having characters be eaten by land sharks to go to other dimensional planes
Oh
for a little bit.
no.
It doesn't
I
hurt
hate when
them.
that happens.
Doesn't hurt them whatsoever. It's just a visual, like they're standing there talking in the middle of combat, and then extra dimensional sharks out of the way. Um,
Hate that.
um,
So inconvenient.
so inconvenient, right? Eats one, pops out another. Crazy.
Crazy.
But besides throwing silly gimmicky stuff in your games like that as a DM GM, like talking with your DM to set those things up makes a lot of sense. If you want a character trope because you know you're going to miss every other session or every couple of sessions because you have something that you have a meeting at the time the thing is once a month, and you're definitely going to miss that all the time because it's an important meeting. Having a character trait that explains where you disappear for once a month is a easy thing to ride in. Are you a werewolf? Do you have some kind of connection to one of your gods? Do you have to go pray and run off somewhere so you're not like can't be by the group because you have to be by yourself? Like you can write in all those wonderful story hooks that can also be added onto or played on later if those situations change. Like suddenly I don't have that meeting anymore. I can play forever. You can either just yada yada past those events when they happen in world, or you come through them somehow. If you're a
Yeah.
werewolf, you suddenly get cured. Whatever. Um, let's see here. We're getting close on time, and I think I could talk about this way, way more. But we're gonna do last thoughts, and then we'll do closing goodbyes and promos and all that fun stuff. So, last minute thoughts on these big bad wolves that we've talked about. We will start with Kathy.
I don't know a big bad wolf, but as you were all talking, I'm sorry, I'm sidestepping a bit. But what I wrote from the beginning, I'm taking notes a bit because that helps me structure my thinking and talking about like learning styles. I also have to have this focused communication style. Otherwise, the thoughts will just pester me. But anyway, the first thing I wrote and the first thing that came to mind, and it was only reinforced this whole conversation, was that I feel like tabletop games and D&D specifically gives you a lot of agency over and I feel like this could help a lot of people who dealt with trauma or abuse, especially young people, because they had very little agency over their lives when this happened, and this gives them a way to express some things without having to own up to some of that trauma at a very direct point. And that's just coming from this mental health perspective. I feel like this is such an amazing resource to implement in I don't know, in group coaching or places where they're group coaching, I mean or like group therapy basically for these
Totally.
children and as an
Yes.
alternative way to observe them. So that's just my 2 pence. I'm sorry, this is not a bad wolf. That's a good wolf.
No,
But I'm
that's good.
so amazed described.
I mean, not to self plug too hard here, but like that when we work with businesses, you know, what I mean, that's something we really focus on is the ability to retrain people and live through these
Yeah.
experiences and rework how people think about each other, especially when you're going from like management to lower staff, is you know reminding people that these are people too, right? A big part of our process is getting upper management to understand that the people below them have value and worth and you know live lives and all that fun stuff and playing these games really help with that. But Jenny, last minute thoughts.
You are thinking about trying to play Dungeons and Dragons and you want to play, but you're feeling overwhelmed by whatever it is that's keeping you from playing. I want you to know that there are so many people who want to teach you how to play Dungeons and Dragons, who want to embrace you at their table, that want you to fall in love with this game the way that we love this game, and give you the courage to face the monsters outside of the game that you fight in the game. Um, there's a table for everyone. Not every table accepts new players, but there are plenty of tables that do, either with the Epic Sages or plenty of other resources out there that want you to get into D&D. So don't let the barriers to entry, the rules, the lack of confidence, the timing, the scheduling, there's a table out there for you and it can happen and you will fall in love with this new storytelling tool that will help get you through.
Nice.
I got to plug in on that,
Oh,
and it is definitely the just like everything in your life. Like when you started something, very rarely are you quote unquote good at it, right?
Totally.
Like
Yeah.
most things take practice or time, you know, repetition, and so and the point of Dungeons and Dragons isn't supposed to be stressful. You know, it's supposed to get together, have a good time, enjoy a communal story, a communal journey of the mind intertwined together to form your own independent story and fantasy with somebody kind of guiding the adventure
But
along.
not my table. My table, you should be very stressed right now.
You played that specifically though. That doesn't count. Big boss. But at the but with all that, it's just you take like it just takes time, you know, and you'll ease into it. And as you're exposed to it, you'll understand more, you'll get better. You'll suddenly you'll go from being the person who's always asking the questions to the person who's telling other people the answer to said questions. And that's when you'll really know, be like, okay, maybe it's not as difficult as I thought it would be. You know, you don't have to speed into it. You know, it could be like some people are players for life, and that's why a lot of dungeon masters get stuck as the dungeon masters for life.
it's true. Not to rush things along, but we are running out of time. So I want to give our two wonderful guests a little bit of promo time before we get out of here. And like I did before, we're gonna flop it one more time. Starting with Miss Jenny here.
What am I doing? I'm plugging myself right now. That's what
You're
I'm
plugging
doing.
yourself. Yes, you already plugged us.
Hey
So
guys,
yeah.
Punk Rock Jenny on TikTok, Punk Rock _ Jenny on Instagram. Let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons and the psychology of running games and world building and healing through emotional storytelling.
Fantastic. Cathy?
So, as I mentioned, I'm your funnel fairy on Instagram. I also post a lot on LinkedIn, but it's basically Cathy _sales _underscore. Oh my God, science. But they're pretty much different platforms that I'm dealing with. And if you just want to hear about like my journey being neurodivergent and read my um basically online journal about how I'm finding business models that work with my and support my mental health, then go to my LinkedIn. If you want to learn about funnels and digital marketing for personal brands, then go to my Instagram.
Heck yeah. Okay, well, our turn for plugging. For those of you in the Fairbanks area, we're going to be busy the next 2 days at a Sprint into Spring, a spring shopping expo over the next couple days. Just a fun little thing at the Forum, Shoppers Forum Mall. Brain fart dying today.
You guys have malls in Alaska?
We
No
do. I
way.
know.
Oh my gosh.
They're all
Like-
abandoned, and we just random businesses pop in there every once in a while and sell their stuff, and then we run
Yeah.
away.
Hey, Hazelwood.
Can we sell moves? Hey, this one's also a gun show. I'm pretty excited about it, actually.
I would believe that. Yeah, see, that's what I'm thinking. Like moose and guns and like that. Yeah, furs. I don't know.
There's
Seals. You guys have seals? I don't know.
definitely. Yep.
Okay.
We got all kinds of fun stuff. But code Younger. What's our code this month? What are we calling it? Because it's a new month. We're in March
Yeah.
now.
I have to come up with something.
Always. And this is your job. Make you come up with the codes.
Fine. It's gonna be Shamrock. How about that?
Oh, Shamrock 907. Shamrock 907. All lowercase, or sorry, all capital, as they've changed the coupons on our website to be all caps. So it's Shamrock 907. Will be the code to get 10% off at the website this month. Yeah, and with adventure in mind, we hope you guys have a wonderful time. Stick around for the music, and guests stick around for the 8 after action fun. Bye bye.
Whoa.
Oh.
Bye. Just never hear that part coming.